Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The joke that ended my marriage wasn't even funny. I'm Colin Barrett, and I should have seen it coming. 38 years old, hands permanently stained with sawdust and concrete, married to a woman who'd rather die than admit she loved a contractor. But love wasn't the problem that Friday night at Murphy's bar. The problem was respect, and mine had just evaporated in front of half the town. "Stop acting like we're married." Sienna's voice cut through the bar's din like a rusty blade. "You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." The laughter started immediately. Harper, Sienna's best friend and professional social climber, nearly choked on her Cosmopolitan. Even Lydia, the bartender who'd known me since high school, couldn't hide her smirk. 23 people in that bar, and every single one of them thought it was hilarious that my wife of 8 years had just publicly castrated me. I smiled. Had to. What else do you do when your wife announces to a room full of neighbors that your marriage is a joke? But inside, something fundamental shifted. Something that had been bending for years finally snapped clean in half. "Guess she forgot who pays the mortgage," I muttered into my beer, loud enough for Mick to hear. My old boxing trainer sat beside me, weathered face creased with concern. "Colin, maybe you should..." "Should what?" "Defend myself? Explain that I work 60-hour weeks to keep her in designer clothes, and that downtown loft she thinks I don't know about?" I kept my voice low, conversational. "Nah, Mick. I think I'll just listen, learn something." Sienna was holding court now, gesturing wildly with her wine glass. Her auburn hair caught the bar lights perfectly. She'd spent $200 on highlights that morning, charged to our joint account, the same account that funded her girls' weekends and business trips that somehow always coincided with Derek Shaw's travel schedule. Derek Shaw, tech entrepreneur, inherited wealth, the kind of guy who wore $1,000 sneakers and called it Casual Friday. He'd been sniffing around Sienna for months, ever since her marketing firm started handling his startup's PR. I'd met him exactly once, at a company barbecue where he'd looked at my calloused hands like they carried disease. "I mean, seriously," Sienna continued, her voice carrying that particular pitch it reached when she'd had 3 glasses of wine. "Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, right? Not some medieval ownership situation where the husband thinks he can control everything." More laughter. Mrs. Patterson from down the street actually applauded. Even Nate, my foreman and one of the few guys I trusted completely, looked uncomfortable. I finished my beer and stood up. The room went quiet for about 3 seconds, long enough for me to feel every eye tracking my movement. Then the conversations resumed, louder now, feeding on the drama. "Heading home," I told Mick. "Want company?" "Nope. Got some thinking to do." The October air bit through my jacket as I walked the 6 blocks home. Our Victorian house sat on Maple Street like a grand old lady trying to maintain dignity in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. I'd bought it as a foreclosure 8 years ago, back when Sienna still pretended to love my rugged charm and authentic masculinity. Spent 3 years renovating it myself, every weekend, every vacation day. The basement alone had taken 6 months. Insulated it, rewired it, turned it into a workshop that would make professional contractors jealous. Sienna called it my man cave, with the kind of condescension usually reserved for discussing children's toys. I sat on the front porch steps, looking at the house I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and made a decision that would change everything. If Sienna wanted to act like we weren't married, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. Saturday morning, I drove to Henderson's Hardware before they opened. Old Pete Henderson unlocked the door when he saw me waiting. "Early bird today, Colin. What's the emergency?" "Need to rekey every lock in my house. Today." Pete raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Small towns teach you when to mind your own business. 20 minutes later, I walked out with enough hardware to secure Fort Knox. Sienna had left for her girls' weekend at 6 a.m., kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. Her overnight bag was packed light, suspicious for someone supposedly spending 3 days at a spa. But then again, lingerie doesn't take up much space. I started with the front door. The old deadbolt came off easy, and the new one slid in like it belonged there. Kitchen door next, then the basement, then the side entrance she never used anyway. Each lock that changed felt like reclaiming territory. My phone buzzed around noon. Text from Sienna. "Having amazing time. Spa is incredible. Love you." I typed back. "Glad you're enjoying yourself. Take your time." While the phone was out, I made another call. Jim Hartley, my lawyer, owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his office for cost. Jim, it's Colin Barrett. Need to talk. Sure thing. What's up? Hypothetically, if someone wanted to protect their assets during a potential marital dispute, what would be the smartest first steps? Long pause. Colin, are you and Sienna having problems? Let's stick with hypothetical for now. Hypothetically, document everything. Bank records, property deeds, evidence of separate versus joint assets. And hypothetically, if joint funds were being used for inappropriate purposes, that would be relevant. How inappropriate? Funding an extramarital affair, for instance. Hotels, gifts, trips, that kind of thing. I smiled for the first time since Friday night. Hypothetically, what if someone had been tracking those expenses for months? Hypothetically, that someone would be in a very strong position. After hanging up, I spent 2 hours in the basement, going through the filing cabinet I'd organized with military precision. 8 months of credit card statements, bank records, hotel receipts I'd found in Sienna's purse. She'd been sloppy, arrogant, certain I was too stupid or too trusting to notice. She was half right. I'd been too trusting. But stupid? That was her mistake. Mrs. Folsom knocked on the kitchen door around 3 o'clock. My 70-year-old neighbor had lived on Maple Street for 40 years and knew everyone's business better than they did themselves. Saw you working on the locks, dear. Everything all right? Just upgrading security, Mrs. Folsom. Can't be too careful these days. Her pale blue eyes twinkled with mischief. Of course not. Especially when certain people think they can come and go as they please, treating good men like doormats. I paused, screwdriver halfway to the doorframe. I'm sorry? Oh, don't mind me. Just an old woman who happens to notice when fancy cars park in certain driveways while husbands are at work. That Shaw boy's Tesla is quite distinctive, isn't it? My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. Mrs. Folsom, what exactly have you seen? Enough to know you're a better man than most would be in your situation, and enough to know that girl doesn't deserve what you've given her. She patted my arm with a surprisingly strong grip. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. After she left, I sat in my kitchen in my house, paid for with my money, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. Sienna wanted to act single? Perfect. She could find out exactly what that felt like. Sunday evening arrived, with the kind of autumn chill that makes you grateful for home. I was in the basement workshop, sanding a piece of oak trim, when I heard the car door slam in the driveway. Sienna's heels clicked up the front walkway, with their usual staccato rhythm. I listened to her fumble with her keys, heard the confused pause when the first key didn't work, then the second, then the third. The doorbell rang. I kept sanding. It rang again, longer this time. Then came the knocking. Colin? Colin, my key isn't working. Can you let me in? I set down the sandpaper and walked upstairs, but I didn't open the door. Keys don't work? I called through the wood. No, I think the lock is broken or something. Can you open up? I'm freezing out here. Locks aren't broken. They're just different. Silence. Then, what do you mean different? I mean I changed them. All of them. The silence stretched longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted into that dangerous register I knew so well. Colin, open this door right now. This is my house too. Is it? Because Friday night at Murphy's, you made it pretty clear that we're not really married. And if we're not married, then this is just my house. The house I bought, renovated, and pay for. I didn't mean. Colin, don't be ridiculous. Open the door. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see her. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, overnight bag slung over her shoulder. She looked beautiful and furious and completely unprepared for this moment. How was the spa weekend? I asked through the glass. Her face went white. It was fine. Great. Now let me in. Funny thing about that spa. I called them this morning. They said they didn't have a reservation under your name, or Harper's name, or any of your usual friends' names. The color drained from her cheeks completely now. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very creative. But explanations are for married couples. And according to you, we're not really married. Mrs. Folsom's porch light came on across the street. Then the Hendersons' light, then the Pattersons'. Half the neighborhood was getting a show, and they knew it. Sienna noticed the audience and lowered her voice. Colin, please. We need to talk about this inside. We needed to talk about a lot of things inside, but you chose to have our conversations in public instead, at Murphy's bar, in front of everyone we know. I was just venting. I didn't mean anything by it. You meant every word, and now you get to live with every word. I let the curtain fall closed and walked back to the basement. Behind me, Sienna pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Colin, you can't do this. This is illegal. I'll call the police. I turned up the radio and went back to sanding. She could call whoever she wanted. I'd checked the law carefully. The house was in my name, bought before we married. She had no legal right to be here, and I had every right to revoke her access. The pounding stopped after 10 minutes. Through the basement window, I watched her drag her suitcase back to her car, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Derek, or Harper, or anyone who might tell her what she wanted to hear. Mrs. Folsom appeared at her front door as Sienna reached her car. Having trouble, dear, the old woman called out sweetly. My husband changed the locks, Sienna snapped. Can you believe that? Oh, I can believe it perfectly. Question is, what did you do to deserve it? Even from the basement, I could hear Sienna's car door slam hard enough to crack the window. As her taillights disappeared down Maple Street, I realized I was smiling. For the first time in months, I was genuinely, completely happy. Round one was mine. Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a personal day. Called Nate, told him to handle the Jefferson Street project, and drove straight to Murphy's bar. Lydia was setting up for lunch service, wiping down tables with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd been doing the same job for 20 years. She looked up when I walked in, her expression carefully neutral. We're not open yet, Colin. I know. Wanted to talk to you privately. She set down her rag and crossed her arms. If this is about Friday night, it's about my marriage, and I think you might be able to help me understand some things. Lydia had been 2 years behind me in high school, back when she was Lydia Chen, and I was the boxer who was supposed to get out of this town on a scholarship. Life had different plans for both of us, but we'd maintained the kind of casual friendship that comes from shared history. Colin, I don't get involved in people's personal business. I'm not asking you to get involved. I'm asking you to help me see what everyone else apparently already knows. She studied my face for a long moment, then walked behind the bar and poured 2 cups of coffee. Sienna and that Shaw guy, she said without preamble. They've been meeting here Tuesday afternoons for 3 months. Always the corner booth, always acting like teenagers who think they're invisible. What do they talk about? You, mostly. How you don't understand her ambitions, how you're holding her back, how she deserves better than a small-town contractor. Lydia's voice carried a bitter edge. Real classy stuff. I sipped my coffee and processed this information. It hurt, but it also clarified things. Anyone else know? Colin, everyone knows. Half the town's been waiting for you to figure it out, and the other half's been taking bets on how long it would take. That stung worse than anything Sienna had said at the bar. I'd been the clueless husband, the last to know, the butt of everyone's joke. There's more, Lydia continued. Shaw's been bragging about how he's going to upgrade her lifestyle once she gets rid of you. Talks about taking her to his place in Portland, maybe San Francisco. Real romantic stuff. His place in Portland? Fancy loft downtown. Apparently, he's been paying for it with money from some business deal. Very proud of himself. I finished my coffee and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks, Lydia. I owe you one. Colin? For what it's worth, most of us were rooting for you to wake up. Sienna's been treating you like garbage for years. My next stop was the gym where Mick trained fighters and taught self-defense classes. I found him in the back office, reviewing schedules, and looking like he'd rather be doing anything else. Paperwork's going to kill me faster than any punch, he grumbled when I walked in. What brings you by? Thought you were working today. Took a day off, wanted to talk. Mick leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. This about Friday night? This about my entire marriage being a lie. I told him everything, The changed locks, the fake spa weekend, Derek Shaw's Tuesday afternoon meetings with my wife. Mick listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So what's your play?" he asked when I finished. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, which is to not be married to me. But she's going to get it the hard way." Mick grinned, and for a moment he looked like the street fighter he'd been before age and wisdom mellowed him. "Need any help with that?" "Maybe. But first, I need more information." That afternoon, I made a call I'd been putting off. Lila Morrison worked in HR at Sienna's marketing firm, and we'd met at several company events over the years. She'd always seemed friendly enough, and more importantly, she'd always seemed to notice things other people missed. "Colin! What a surprise! How are you?" "I've been better, Lila. Listen, I was wondering if you might have time for coffee this week. There's something I'd like to discuss." "Of course. Is everything okay? That's what I'm trying to figure out." We met Wednesday afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from both our usual haunts to avoid running into anyone we knew. Lila arrived first, already seated in a corner booth with a clear view.
2 key cards. You asked for 2. Who was the second for?
My colleague needed a place.
Your colleague who calls you baby in her texts?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
View of the entire restaurant. "You look terrible," she said as I sat down. "Thanks. That's exactly what every man wants to hear. I'm serious. You look like you haven't slept in days." She wasn't wrong. Since Sunday night, I'd been running on coffee and adrenaline, spending my evenings in the basement workshop and my days gathering information. Sleep seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. "Lila, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. What do you know about Sienna and Derek Shaw?" Her face went carefully blank. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what does everyone at your office know that I don't?" She stirred her latte for a long time before answering. "Colin, I really don't think I should. My wife locked me out of my own life, Lila. She's been having an affair, lying to me, and apparently making me look like a fool in front of everyone I know." "The least you can do is tell me the truth," Lila sighed. "They've been seeing each other since July. Shaw's been coming by the office constantly, always finding excuses to meet with Sienna privately. She's been taking long lunches, leaving early, using company resources for personal calls." "Company resources?" "She's been booking hotel rooms through the company account, claiming they're for client meetings. But the dates don't match any of our client schedules." This was better than I'd hoped. "Do you have records of that?" "I shouldn't be telling you this, but yes." "And Colin? There's something else. Shaw's been pressuring her to quit and come work for his company. He's offered her a position that doesn't really exist, with a salary that's way above market rate." "What kind of position?" "Vice President of Strategic Development. It's a made-up title for a made-up job. Basically, he's offering to pay her 6 figures to be his girlfriend." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Has she accepted? Not yet, but she's been talking about it constantly. How she's wasted her talents in this small town, how she needs to think bigger, aim higher, how she needs to get rid of the small-town contractor husband who's holding her back. Leela nodded reluctantly. "I'm sorry, Colin. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, it's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because now I know exactly what I'm dealing with." I thanked Leela and walked back to my truck, feeling lighter than I had in days. Information was power, and I finally had enough information to fight back. Sienna wanted to upgrade her life? Perfect. I was about to give her an education in consequences that would make her old life look like paradise. Thursday evening, I drove to Derek Shaw's loft in downtown Portland. The building was one of those glass and steel monuments to new money, all clean lines and pretentious architecture. The kind of place that screamed, "I'm successful," to anyone insecure enough to be impressed. I'd done my homework. The loft was registered under Shaw's business name, but the lease payments were coming from an account that traced back to my wife's company credit card. Technically, marital funds were paying for her love nest, which made this a legal visit to my own property. I took the elevator to the 12th floor and walked down the hallway until I found Unit 1247. The door was expensive-looking hardwood, with a digital lock that probably cost more than most people's cars. I knocked. Footsteps. Then Derek's voice. "Who is it?" "Maintenance. Need to check the water pressure." The door opened, and Derek Shaw appeared wearing nothing but silk pajama pants and an expression of confusion that quickly shifted to alarm when he saw my face. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Visiting my property." I pushed past him into the loft before he could react. The space was exactly what I'd expected. Minimalist furniture, Abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows, with a view of the harbor. And there, sitting on the leather couch in one of my wife's nightgowns, was Sienna herself. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Colin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sienna, nice place you've got here. Very modern. Must cost a fortune." Derek had recovered from his initial shock and was trying to project authority. "You can't just break in here. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. While you're at it, ask them about the legalities of using marital funds to pay for an extramarital affair. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating." The color drained from Derek's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of the lease agreement I'd obtained through Jim Hartley's connections. Lease payments coming from Pinnacle Marketing's corporate account. Pinnacle Marketing, where my wife works and has access to company funds. Company funds that are partially derived from the joint account she shares with her husband. That would be me. Derek looked at Sienna, who was pulling a throw pillow over herself like it could make her disappear. "This is harassment," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No. This is a conversation. See, I've been learning some interesting things about you, Derek. Like how your startup is hemorrhaging money. How you've been lying to investors about your user numbers. How you're about 3 months away from bankruptcy." Now Derek looked genuinely frightened. "How did you? Small town, big mouths. Amazing what people will tell you when they think you're just a dumb contractor." I walked over to the window and looked out at the harbor. "Nice view. Shame you won't be able to afford it much longer." "Colin, please," Sienna finally spoke. "Let's talk about this rationally." "Rationally? Like you talked rationally when you humiliated me in front of half the town? Like you talked rationally when you decided to use our money to fund your affair? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. And it's exactly what everyone else thinks too. The only difference is, now I'm thinking back." Derek tried to step between us, puffing out his chest like he was some kind of tough guy. "Look, Barrett, I think you should leave. Sienna doesn't want to be with you anymore. Accept it and move on." I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "You know what, Derek? You're absolutely right. She doesn't want to be with me. And after tonight, she won't have to be." I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Sienna. "Divorce papers. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage based on adultery and financial misconduct. You'll notice I'm requesting sole ownership of all property purchased before the marriage, plus damages for misuse of joint funds." Sienna's hands shook as she opened the envelope. "Colin, you can't." "I can, and I am. You wanted out of our marriage? Congratulations, you got your wish." Derek was reading over her shoulder, his face getting paler with each page. "This is insane. You can't take everything." "I'm not taking everything. I'm keeping what's mine and asking for compensation for what you stole. There's a difference." "We didn't steal anything." "Really? Because I've got 8 months of receipts that say otherwise. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, and let's not forget this lovely loft. All paid for with money that belonged to both of us, used to fund an affair that benefited neither of us." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Derek, you might want to check your email. I sent some information about your company's actual financial status to a few people who might be interested. Investors, potential clients, business reporters, you know, the kind of people who appreciate transparency." Derek's face went from pale to green. "You bastard." "No, I'm just a small-town contractor who's tired of being everyone's punchline. But don't worry. After tonight, I don't think anyone's going to be laughing at me anymore." I left them there, sitting in their expensive loft that they could no longer afford, holding divorce papers that would destroy the life they'd tried to build on my ruins. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of a job well done. The Waterfront Festival was the biggest event in our town's social calendar. Every August, the entire community gathered for 3 days of food trucks, live music, and the kind of forced merriment that small towns excel at. This year, it fell on the first weekend after I'd served Sienna with divorce papers. Perfect timing. I'd spent the week preparing for what I knew would be our final public confrontation. Word travels fast in a town of 8,000 people, and by Friday morning, everyone knew that Colin Barrett had finally grown a spine. The festival was in full swing when I arrived Saturday afternoon. The main stage was set up in Harbor Park, surrounded by vendor booths and picnic tables where families ate overpriced barbecue and pretended to enjoy local bands that should have stayed in their garages. I found Mick at the beer tent, holding court with a group of guys from the gym. "There he is," Mick announced as I approached. "The man of the hour. Heard you gave Shaw a real education the other night," said Tommy Brennan, one of Mick's fighters. "About time someone put that pretentious ass in his place." "Just having a conversation," I replied, accepting the beer Mick handed me. "Hell of a conversation. Word is Shaw's been calling everyone in town, trying to find a lawyer willing to take his case. Any takers?" Jim Hartley laughed so hard he nearly choked. Said Shaw's lucky you didn't press charges for theft. I was about to respond when a commotion near the main stage caught my attention. Sienna had arrived, and she hadn't come alone. Derek was with her, along with Harper and two other women from her office. They looked like they were dressed for a cocktail party instead of a small-town festival. All designer clothes and obvious jewelry. "Looks like the opposition just showed up," Mick observed. "Good. I was hoping they would." The next hour was a masterclass in small-town social dynamics. Sienna and her group tried to work the crowd, smiling and laughing and acting like nothing had changed. But I could see the strain around her eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them. And I could see how people responded to her, polite but distant, friendly but not warm. Derek looked even worse. He kept checking his phone and scanning the crowd like he was expecting an attack. Which, in a way, he was. At 4 o'clock, the festival organizers announced that the main stage was open for community announcements. Local politicians gave brief speeches, business owners promoted their services, and the high school principal reminded everyone about the upcoming fundraiser. I waited until they asked if anyone else had something to share. And then I walked up to the microphone. The crowd quieted as I adjusted the mic stand. 300 people, maybe more, all looking at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to anticipation. In the front row, Sienna had gone completely white. "Hi everyone, I'm Colin Barrett, for those who don't know me. I've lived in this town my whole life, and I've always believed in being straight with people. So today, I want to be straight with all of you about something that's been weighing on my mind." I paused, letting the silence build. 2 weeks ago, my wife told me, in front of most of you, that I didn't have a say in where she went or who she was with. She was right. I didn't have a say in her decision to have an affair with Derek Shaw. I didn't have a say in her decision to use our joint funds to pay for hotel rooms and fancy dinners with her lover. And I didn't have a say in her decision to make me look like a fool in front of everyone I've known since childhood. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the vendors had stopped what they were doing to listen. "But here's what I do have a say in," I continued. "I have a say in whether I stay married to someone who treats me with contempt. I have a say in whether I let people walk all over me. And I have a say in standing up here today and telling all of you the truth about what's been happening in my marriage." Sienna was trying to push through the crowd toward the stage, but people weren't making room for her. If anything, they seemed to be closing ranks, blocking her path. Now, some of you might think this is inappropriate, that private matters should stay private. And normally, I'd agree with you. But when someone makes your private business public by humiliating you in front of the entire town, well, I think that changes the rules. Derek had given up any pretense of dignity and was openly trying to leave, but Nate and two other guys from my crew had positioned themselves near the exits, not threatening, just present. So I want to thank Derek Shaw for showing me who my wife really is, and I want to thank my wife for showing me who I really am. Turns out, I'm not the pushover everyone thought I was. I stepped back from the microphone to a sound I hadn't expected: applause. It started with Mrs. Folsom, who was clapping slowly and deliberately from her folding chair near the front. Then Mick joined in. Then Lydia. Then Tommy and the guys from the gym. Within seconds, most of the crowd was applauding. As I walked off the stage, I saw Sienna standing near the back of the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Derek was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he'd found an exit after all. Harper approached me as I reached the bottom of the stage steps. "Colin, that was completely uncalled for," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You had no right to humiliate Sienna like that." "I had no right? Harper, where were you when your best friend was humiliating me? Where was all this moral outrage then?" "That's different." "No, it's not different. It's exactly the same. The only difference is, this time the shoe's on the other foot." Harper opened her mouth to respond, but Lydia appeared at my elbow. "Harper, honey, maybe you should go check on your friend. She looks like she could use some support right about now." Harper glared at both of us, then stalked away toward where Sienna was still standing, looking lost and alone in the middle of a crowd that had once treated her like royalty. "That was brutal," Lydia said as we watched Harper try to comfort Sienna. "That was justice. The same thing, sometimes." As the sun set over the harbor, I found myself surrounded by people I'd known my entire life. People who were treating me with a respect I hadn't felt in years. Mick bought me another beer. Mrs. Folsom told me how proud she was of me. Even Jim Hartley showed up to shake my hand and tell me I'd handled everything perfectly. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like myself again. Later that evening, as the festival wound down and people started heading home, I saw Sienna one last time. She was sitting alone on a bench near the harbor, still in her designer dress, staring out at the water. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead, I got in my truck and drove home to the house I'd built with my own hands. The house where I'd changed the locks and reclaimed my life. The house where I would sleep peacefully for the first time in months, knowing that I'd finally stopped being everyone's punchline and started being the author of my own story. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Sienna got her freedom and a job in Boston. Apparently, Derek's offer had evaporated along with his company's funding. Derek himself had left town quietly one night, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and a reputation that would follow him wherever he went. I kept the house, obviously, and the workshop in the basement where I'd planned my revenge, and the respect of a community that had watched me stand up for myself when it mattered most. But most importantly, I kept the lesson I'd learned, that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop caring what other people think and start caring about what you know is right. Sienna had been wrong about one thing. I did get a say in where she went and who she was with. I got to say goodbye.